title for these classes here, or theme?
Well, you gotta figure the main thing is Muslim morals and manners. Then we had subsections. Then we have sections. This section is interpersonal relations.
Morals and manners.
So that's the main topic. And then the section we're in right now is interpersonal relations. And in specific, we're talking about relationships between Muslims.
The microphone isn't on. The microphone isn't on.
Maybe that's when we start.
Yeah, but the mic is off.
Really?
You didn't know that?
I think it's up to you. You're the boss. It doesn't matter. Either one, what do you think? That's what it
I'm not sure. Did he want to start it or not? Because he set it up, but then he went in the office, so I'm not sure if he's ready to go. I am, if he is.
Oh, no, it is.
Sam.
الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I want to ask a question really briefly. Can I just see a show of hands of the people who were here during the CIC for the first lecture after Salat al-Fajr? See hands for the first one after Fajr. طيب. Okay, I have a follow-up question. I left the masjid during the question and answer, and you can hear the speaker still talking while I was outside. And there was a question about dua, and a person calling upon their son, asking them, my son, I want you to love me and, treat me well, and so on. Does everybody recall that? What were the specifics of the question? If somebody remembers the specifics of the question. Anybody? Hafadha. You remember the question that was asked? Related to me, yeah.
Well, the person who asked that asked, should you make dua to other people, like for other people to do things for you?
Dua to other people,
Like making
for other people to do things for you?
No, like making dua to other people for them to do stuff for you.
For them to do stuff for you. Is that how you remember it, Habib? Tayyib, how you remember it?
I think the question was, the speaker was talking about exaggeration in dua. And I think the questioner was asking,
Mm-hmm.
asking your son to love you and so forth, would that be considered as an exaggeration?
Okay, because I heard his answer, and he repeated the question like in the summarized form, and he basically said that would not be, because I don't think I thought the question was about a shirk. Would it be a shirk? Was that the question, or was it exaggeration? She thought it was shirk. Okay, and I remember him saying, because I remember him saying, it's not shirk. It's not shirk. And then I think someone in the audience was insisting that it was a shirk. Wallah? Okay, that being said, I just thought it was pertinent because he answered correctly, but I just wish he would have been a little bit more thorough in the answer to clarify, because obviously some people are under the impression that it is a shirk. And we shouldn't have that impression. We need to be clear about the concept of dua, and when is it shirk and when is it not shirk. Because these terminologies, they're like a two-edged sword. Sometimes you have people who, they apply them to things that they're not applied to. And sometimes they're applied to things and people don't apply them to those things. So we need to be clear so that if something is a shirk, we need to know that it is, so we can avoid it. And if it's not a shirk, we need to know it's not, so that we don't accuse someone of committing a shirk and then by default accuse them of what goes with that, which is what? Kufr, and leaving the deen, right? But that said, a dua, okay, generally speaking, we know that, what is a shirk? It is when you give something which is specific to Allah to other than Allah. That's a shirk. One of the things that's specific to Allah is what? A ta'abbud. Ibadah. Is that not so? So if you give ibadah to other than Allah, then you commit what? Shirk. What we need to understand though is that al-ibadah, you have two types of what? Ibadah. You have al-ibadat al-mahbah. You have acts of worship, which that's all they are. This action can only be an act of worship. It can't be anything else. So if somebody does this, they're worshiping. And if they direct it to other than Allah, then they're worshiping other than Allah, and they're guilty of what? A shirk. Like what? Like a sujood. Prostration, that's an ibadah. You do that to other than Allah, you're what? You're guilty of a shirk. A dhabh. Slaughter. You slaughter for other than Allah, that's shirk. You can't slaughter, you can't sacrifice for anyone other than Allah. At-tawaf. You circle around something as an act of worship, you can't do that for other than who? You can't do that for anyone other than Allah. Okay? That's what we call ibadat al-mahbah. It's something specific to Allah. But you also have al-ibadat al-mushtaraka. You have actions which they're ibadah, and actions which what? At the same time they're not ibadah. And certain factors are going to determine whether it's an act of worship or not. One of those is mahabbah, love. Love is what? Ibadah, but it can also be what? It can be not worship. So for example, when a person loves their father, that's not worship, they're not committing shirk. Right? But when they love Allah, there's a special type of what? Love for Allah. And when they love Allah in that way that they're supposed to love Allah, they're what? They're worshiping Allah. If they give that love to other than Allah, then they're now doing what? They're committing a shirk. Wadah, makes sense? وَمِن ذَلِكَ, and from that is a dua. A dua can be ibadah. It can be an act of worship. But it can also be what? A customary act which has nothing to do with worship. How do we know? We know because sometimes Allah attributes a dua to Himself. أُدْعُوا رَبَّكُمْ تَضَرُّعًا وَخُفْيًا. Call upon your Lord with humility and what? And sincerity, right? Call upon your Lord, humbling yourself, lowering yourself. Okay? But we also have the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He says, لا تجعلوا دعاءكم لا تجعلوا دعاء الرسول بينكم I'm sorry. لا تجعلوا دعاءكم الرسول كدعاء بعضكم بعضا. Don't make your calling of the Prophet like your calling of what? Of each other. So when the companions used to what? They would call the Prophet, they would call him in a way which was not befitting for him because of his rank and his status. So Allah says, when you call upon him, you can call upon him. But don't call upon the way you call upon each other. You guys see that? So Allah is attributing dua to what? To human beings. And saying, yeah, Muslims, you can call upon the Messenger of Allah. But don't call upon the way you call upon each other. And all of this is what? Iqrar. It's Allah tacitly approving of human beings calling on each other. But they're calling on each other. Aren't they calling on who? On Allah. They're two different callings. And we have other ayat where Allah attributes calling to what? To human beings. That being said, we know that dua sometimes it's worship, sometimes it's not worship. So when is it worship? When is it worship? Like it's worship when you ask something of someone who is not present, not in your proximity, or you ask them something which only Allah can what? Can do or give. You guys follow me? If you have those two conditions, then that's worship. And it should only be directed to Allah. So for example, let's say that I'm in my home, in a room in my house. And my wife is in another room. And I call upon her and I call my wife, right? I say, for example, Ismail, bring me the vacuum. Okay? I just what? I called her. I made what? Dua to her. Okay? But she's where? She's in my proximity. She's within what? Earshot. She can hear me. And I asked her to do something that she can do. Is that shirk? But suppose she was at a friend's house. Okay? 3 or 4 miles away. And I said, Ismail, bring me the vacuum. But what do you think now? Kaif, how's it shirk?
Because she's not there.
Right, she's not there. So I'm asking her, and she's not there, as if she can what? She can hear me even though she's what? Not in my proximity. And this is a quality that belongs only to Allah. Allah is the one who, no matter how far away you are from Him, no matter how softly you speak, He can what? He can hear you. But when we give this quality to other than Allah, we're committing what? Shirk. But suppose she's in the house. And I say, Ismail, cure my cancer. Cure my cancer. Like she's in the house. Shirk or not? Like, Leah shirk. Why is it shirk? Because she can't what? She can't cure me. Only Allah can cure me. I'm asking her something to do something that she can't do. Only Allah can do it. Tayyib. I say to my son, I say, oh, Nafis, love me. Treat me the way a father is supposed to be treated. Respect me. Honor me. I'm calling upon him. Shirk or not shirk? Not shirk. Lish. Because he's in my proximity and I'm asked to do something he can do. I mention this why? Because our deen is a deen of what? Principles. And once you have the principles, you have what? A fishing pole. And when you have a fishing pole, you're going to what? You're going to eat forever. But if somebody gives you a fish, you're going to eat what? For today. And then the next time you're what? You're hungry, you have to ask him again. And these principles are important because we need to know what? We need to be able to say ourselves when we're alone and there's no one to give us a fatwa. We need to know this is shirk or it's not shirk. So in the case of dua, we know it's shirk if what? If you ask someone who's not what? There, shirk. Ask someone who's there, but you ask them to do something that they can't do. It's what? Shirk. Wadah? Make sense? So I just want to mention that because Jazakallah khair. I thought the brother's presentation was excellent. I thought his lecture was good. I thought his references were good. Thought his memorization of the Quran was good, and the quotes he gave were good. But I just thought when he got to this point, he just wasn't precise enough, and he needed to give them a fishing pole and not give them a fish. That's all. But that said, we'll continue our discussion of the rights of Muslims. And we reached the point in the hadith, because we were using the hadith of Haqq al-Muslim al-Muslim Sitt, the rights that one Muslim owes to another Muslim are 6. We're using that as our guide. And we reached the point where the Prophet ﷺ said, the place where the Prophet ﷺ said, وَإِذَا مَرِضَ فَعُدْ. And if he becomes ill, then visit him. We're going to mention some points as it relates to that, about visiting the sick. First of all, we need to know that this is an extremely virtuous deed. It's a deed for which we get lots of reward. There's a great reward the Prophet promised the person who visits the sick. And we find that in the hadith, collected by Muslim, Ahmad, and Tirmidhi, on the authority of Thawban, in which the Prophet ﷺ, and I'm going to suffice myself with the English so that we don't keep you guys too late. So he said, whoever visits a sick person will remain in the khurfa of paradise until he returns. It was said to the Prophet, O Messenger of Allah, and what is intended by the khurfa of paradise? He said, it's harvest. And no way, he said, what that means is that the Prophet is promising him paradise, and not just paradise, but he's going to what? Reap. It's what? It's what? It's fruits. All the fruits of paradise he's going to what? He's going to gather them and collect them. For doing what? For visiting a sick person. Another hadith collected by Ahmad al-Tirmidhi, and authenticated by al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, in which the Prophet said, there is not a Muslim who visits another Muslim during an illness in the morning hours, except that 70,000 angels will pray for him until the evening comes. If he visited him in the evening, 70,000 angels will pray for him until the morning, and a special garden will be granted to him in paradise. So the two ahadith which show you the virtue, the merit, the excellence of visiting the sick people. But the next thing I want to mention is, what is the ruling? What is the ruling of visiting the sick person? Is it wajib? Is it obligatory? If it's obligatory for everyone, al-a'yan, or al-kifaya. The Prophet, he said, fa'ud. He said, visit him. That's an imperative. An imperative indicates what? That it's obligatory. But when you look at the statements of the scholars, they're all indicative of the fact that it's obligatory al-kifaya. It's a collective obligation, which means if someone from our community were to become ill, and we were to become aware of it as a group, as a collective group, and a handful of people went to visit that person and pay their respects, then the rest of us will be free of obligation and free of any sin. We will be absolved of obligation and sin. But if all of us heard about it and none of us went to visit, then we would all be what? Sinful. And we would all be blameworthy. So it's obligatory on what? On the community. It's a communal obligation. طيب. ثم بعد ذلك, if you look at the hadith, the Prophet said, وَإِذَا مَرِضَ, if he becomes ill, فَعُدْ, visit him. طيب. If he becomes ill, that's pretty what? General, isn't it? There's no specifics there. So what do we benefit from the fact that it's very what? Very general. We benefit a few things. One, did the Prophet mention the relationship of the one who's sick? For example, did he say, وَإِذَا مَرِضَ فَكَانَ قَرِيبًا, if he was sick and he was what? Related to you. Or وَإِذَا مَرِضَ وَكَانَ صَدِيقًا, if he was one of your what? Close friends. The Prophet didn't say that. He said if he became what? Ill. So one thing we benefit, because the Prophet didn't specify, is that it doesn't matter if you know them or you know them. It doesn't matter if they're related to you or they're not related to you. They're a close associate or someone who what? You have what? A casual relationship with. You could not even know. You could come to a place, like for example, you visit Colombia for CIC and you hear there's a brother in the hospital. Okay? You hear about that. You don't even know this person from Adam. You what? You go and visit him. You don't have to know him or know the person to what? To visit them. Any Muslim you hear about them being sick, you should visit them. You don't have to know them. Okay? That's the first thing we get from that. The second thing he said, وَإِذَا مَرِضَ. If he became ill, he didn't say maradan shadidan. He didn't say a severe illness. He said what if he became ill? So he made it general, which means what? Any illness. Could be a serious illness, could be a minor illness. He has the flu and he's been in bed for a couple of days. Let's go see him. Let's go visit him. Nobody says, oh, it's just the flu, man. It's not like pneumonia. He's not about to die or anything. No, it doesn't matter what the illness is. If he's sick, you what? You go and visit. طيب ثم بعد ذلك he said وَإِذَا مَرِضَ, and he didn't mention what? A time. He didn't mention what? A time. Whether we're talking about the duration of the illness. Some people, they said, well, you have to be sick for 3 days before it counts. No, the Prophet didn't specify. He said إِذَا مَرِضَ, if he became ill. So if he just got ill today, he was fine yesterday and today he became ill, we go and visit. We don't have to wait to see, well, let's see how long he remains ill. It doesn't matter how long. Another one, he didn't specify the time of day. So we didn't say if he became ill, then visit him during the daytime, during the evening. It doesn't matter. You can visit at what? There's no specific time. You can visit at any time. As long as it's within the time allowed by the what? The urf. By the customs and tradition of people. So for example, if it's not acceptable in the custom of people to come to someone's house at 1 o'clock in the morning, then you don't do that. You follow me? Not because you can't visit at time, but because in the custom of the people, that's what? That's disrespectful. That's intrusion. Or that's being intrusive or whatever. But outside of that, if the urf permits it, if the custom permits it, then you what? You visit. There's no specific time to visit. طيب, I think those are the 3 things. So I have a question for you. I want you to think about this. Don't be hasty. Can a woman visit a man? I'm not saying this to be controversial.
Yes.
I'm saying this because we should know.
Yes.
We should know.
Yes.
Depends. That's a pretty good answer. Depends on what, Habib? Depends on relationship. Like, suppose there was no relationship. There's no relationship whatsoever. No relation.
They didn't say anything about relationship.
Okay? Depends on what? Who she's with. Like, that's not bad.
I think she can with conditions.
With conditions. What conditions would you give, sister?
For instance, she would not be able to go by herself. She would have to have somebody that's mahram
Okay.
for her.
Okay.
And she would, the person ill would have to be covered, and she would have to be covered.
Jimmy?
You know.
Okay. All right. These are really some pretty good responses. No khalwa. Ahsant, because that's a qaida, right? So he said she couldn't be alone. She couldn't be alone with him. طيب. I'm going to give you some hadith. The first one's collected by Bukhari. First of all, Bukhari himself, he has a bab, he has a chapter. Tafadhal. Distance. She can't get too close. Okay? طيب. First of all, Bukhari has a chapter in his Sahih. He entitles it Bab Iyadat al-Nisa al-Rijal. He said the chapter containing evidence supporting women visiting sick men. Then he mentions a hadith in mu'allaq form. He mentions a hadith, and the hadith it says, and Darda visited a sick Ansari man who regularly attended the masjid. He also mentioned a hadith on the authority of Aisha, who said, when the Messenger of Allah first arrived in Medina, Abu Bakr and Bilal fell ill. Abu Bakr and who? Bilal. I visited them during their illness. And when I entered upon them, I said, dear father, how do you feel? O Bilal, how do you feel? And she mentioned the rest of the hadith. Ibn Hajar, he said, comment on the hadith, he said, the chapter title means that it is permissible, even if they were not related, provided that the condition of acceptability was fulfilled. What is that condition of acceptability? What will make it acceptable? He says that the woman has to be properly covered. And there can be no possibility of temptation or illicit what? Behavior. There can be no fear that there will be what? Temptation or illicit behavior. In the case of Aisha, we know that there's not going to be a temptation. Why? Who was there? Her father. Right? Okay? So basically what the scholar said is, look, this could happen, it could take place, but the woman has to observe certain decorum. And she has to be what? Covered. And there could be no fear of what? Of any fitna, like having her what? Mahram be there. Right? Her mahram would be there. Either he himself would be the sick person or one of the sick people, or he accompanies her. Okay? And also, as Sheikh Muhammad said, there can be no what? No khalwa. They couldn't be alone. Jameel. So that said, and that doesn't mean, we're talking about permissibility. Doesn't mean that now a woman has to go and what? Visit a man. A woman may personally feel what? Uncomfortable visiting a man. There's nothing wrong with that. We're just saying it's permissible. And we should know that. That's all. Tayyib. Suppose the person who's sick was unconscious. Suppose he was unconscious. Should you still visit him? What do you think? Yes, because the Prophet said, وَإِذَا مَرِضَ فَعُدْ. He said, if he's ill, then you visit him. He didn't specify that he had to be ill but conscious. And the Prophet ﷺ, he visited some of his companions while they were what? Unconscious. He visited them while they were unconscious. And even though he's unconscious, there's still benefit in the visit. So for example, sometimes you visiting is not only for the sake of the one who is ill, but could also benefit who? His family. His family, you coming can sometimes lift what? Their spirits. Can lift their spirits. They have someone who's ill, and you come and visit them, that can lift their spirits. And it can calm their nerves and quiet their concerns just by somebody coming what? Showing their concern for their ailing uncle or ailing father or ailing brother, etc. Also, when you come, even if they're unconscious, you can still make what? You can still make dua for them. You can still make, so there's lots of benefit that will come even if they're not conscious, even if they're not conscious. طيب, let's close.
So you said under the title of the women visiting the men. So we're to assume that it goes both ways, or just for women visiting men?
No, obviously anything that's allowed for women in the Sharia is the same for men and vice versa in the Sharia. But again, the condition would have to be there, that the man couldn't be alone with her, and the woman would have to be properly covered, and he'd have to observe certain decorum. So if there were a woman in the hospital alone with no mahram, the man couldn't just what? Go and visit her. You follow what I'm saying? طيب. All right. Let's close with some etiquettes. So now you're going to go and visit. You're going to go and visit someone. You need to realize that there are certain etiquettes you should you should observe in order to make this visit rewardable or more rewardable, to increase the reward you'll get for the visit and to avoid doing something which will what? Which will decrease the reward that you get when you visit. So what are some of those etiquettes? The first one is that when you go, you should ask about the person's condition. And you're going to find whenever a hadith is mentioned, whether it's the companions talking about a visit that they paid, or the Prophet paid them a visit, you'll always find that they'll ask something like, for example, كَيْفَ تَجِدُكَ? How do you find yourself? How do you feel? They would always ask about the condition. The Prophet would always ask, and his companions following his example would always ask, how are you feeling? Don't go there and ask about everything except their condition. Remember, the reason why you're there is because they are ill. So don't, go there and say, remember that $50 that you borrowed from me? I was just wondering if you're going to pay that back, because I don't know, you might not make it out of this, so you start talking about everything except what? Except them. No, it's about them. They're the hero of the meeting, right? They're the most important thing. So ask them about their condition. Make that your priority. How are you doing? How are you feeling? And the $50, It'll be all right, inshallah. If you don't get it back from them, you'll get it back from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, from his kids. Yeah, we'll just go after them, right? All right. The next thing from the etiquettes is providing a suitable religious reminder or advice. So, based upon the circumstances or the situation, then you want to try to remind them of Allah and their responsibilities to Allah. Don't start talking about the weather, talking about sports, talking about this and that and the other thing. When this is an opportunity, when the hearts are what? Soft, and a person is weak, and they realize how tentative life is, how weak and helpless they are. This is an opportunity you seize to what? To remind them of Allah. And you don't have to remind them directly. You don't have to say, oh, you're a smoker, and you shave, and you're a bad Muslim, and you really got to get your life together, you might die, and you'll die. You don't tell them like that. No, but you do it in an indirect way, right? So you'll tell them, for example, that the importance of a tawbah, just in general, and how it's never too late, to repent, and you're talking in general. Not like you're talking to them specifically, but the virtues of a tawbah and how there's no time limit on a tawbah. And there's, that tawbah is something that we do all the time. It's not something that we wait to a specific time. And we should make lots of istighfar. It's important for us what? To have this istighfar. And also it's important for us to make sure that the rights of people have been observed. And you talked about them in an indirect fashion instead of in a direct fashion. But another etiquette is that you avoid overstaying your welcome. You avoid overstaying your welcome. So you've come to visit, you've come to encourage, you've come to lift spirits. You haven't come to become a burden on the person who's ill. And sometimes, when you visit someone, even when they're sick, they feel obligated to what? To entertain you. You follow me? And their condition might not permit it. And so now you're actually making things worse when you're supposed to be making things better. So you don't prolong. You came for something specific. Once you've done that, then you get gone, basically, right? And but let me ask you this question. Suppose you come and you're ready to leave, and the sick person says, "No, stay." What should you do then? Stay, because sometimes your presence actually what? It's a type of therapy for them. It's a type of therapy.
Comfort.
Right. So exactly. So you kind of gauge it, but you remember that your general approach to the matter is to get in, do what you came to do, and leave, and not to overstay your welcome. But another etiquette is to place your hands on what? On the sick person. To place your hands on them. And the Prophet used to do this. And al-Bukhari actually has a chapter in his Sahih, in which he entitles it, Babu Wadul Yad al-Marid. The chapter of placing hands upon what? The ill person. And the Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith of Aisha bin Sa'ad, who mentions that her father Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, he was visited by the Prophet ﷺ during the illness of his. And when the Prophet came, he did what? He put his hand on his forehead. Then he wiped his face. And then he put his hand on his stomach, which is where he had the illness. And he prayed for him. So it's from the adab of the one who visits to what? To put your hand. And I'm going to ask you honestly. When you're ill and you have that close relationship with someone and they put their hand on you, that's comforting. It makes you feel comforted. So you comfort the person in the way which is what? Suitable for the circumstance. By putting your hands on them. You also should be keen to say that which will lift the spirits of the ailing person and fill them with hope. Lift their spirits and fill them with hope. So, for example, let's say that you went in and I don't know if anybody's ever had someone that they know and they care about, or even just any Muslim who was afflicted with a terminal disease, terminal illness. And you go and you visit them, and sometimes they don't look good. You got somebody who's dying of cancer. You can't go in there and say, "Man, you look terrible." awful.
2 days left.
You can't say that. Even if that's how you feel. I've never seen you like this before. You follow me? Maybe you look at them and you want to cry because of how they look. You got to keep it together. You got to keep all those emotions back because your job is to make them feel better. And you're not going to make them feel better by saying those things or even becoming emotional. You guys see that? So you've got to say things like the Prophet sometimes you say, La ba's tahur, inshallah. He would say, no harm. This is just a purification by Allah's will. Or if Allah wills. Or he would say, for example, Ya bushra. He would say, oh, glad tidings. Because a Muslim never becomes ill. Except that Allah will erase, through his illness, his sins. Like fire removes the impurities from gold and silver. He would say things like this. And that makes the person almost what? Feel blessed that they've become ill. Because Allah is purifying me of sins. So like I said, we have to be the ones who we come into that setting and we're lifting the spirits. That the person feels actually better when we left than feeling worse. But suppose the person is terminally ill. And there's a certain level of confidence. Obviously, we never know what's going to happen. But there's this feeling that this person is in their last hours. Then we should always encourage that person to say, La ilaha illallah. As we find the hadith of Muslim on the authority of Abu Hurairah, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Laqminu mawtakum, La ilaha illallah. He said, encourage those who you know are about to die to say La ilaha illallah. And we know the one who dies and the last word he says is La ilaha illallah, he enters what? Paradise. But how do you do that? How do you encourage him? Do you say, for example, قُلْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا قَبْلَ مَا تَمُوتْ قَبْلَ مَا تَمُوتْ قُلْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا. Do you say La ilaha illallah because you're about to die, you're about to die? Do you say that? Abadan. You're going to frighten the person. And you might frighten them so much they won't say it. But rather what you do is, you get close to the person and you what? You say it. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. And inshallah they'll do what? They'll follow you. They'll repeat. Okay? Remember, the whole time you're always trying to what? Be a calming force and not what? An unsettling force. That ثم بعد ذلك أخيرا, the last thing I want to mention is that it's critical that you do what? That you pray for them. The Prophet ﷺ, whenever he visited the sick, he was keen to what? To pray for them. So for example, he would say, for example, Allahumma Rabban Nas, Adhib al-Ba's, Washfi anta shafi, La shifaa illa shifa'u shifa'an la yughadiru saqama. He used to say, O Allah, Rabban Nas, the Lord of mankind, Anta shafi, you are the healer, the curer. Okay? Allahumma Rabban Nas, Adhib al-Ba's. He would say, take away the harm, take away the illness. Washfi anta shafi. And cure him because you are the cure. The cure is in your hand. Okay? Shifa'an, a cure, la yughadiru saqama. A cure that will not leave behind it any illness. So he would make these types of what? Of adiyah, these types of dua for the one who was ill. And so we need to make sure that that's a part of what? Of what we do when we get there. What tends to happen is when we visit the marid, we visit them and we might, start talking and we spend time and then we realize, oh man, where'd the time go? And we leave. And then if we were to have that checklist, when we get in the car and we start to say, okay, these are the things I was supposed to do, we'll find that we didn't do one. We didn't do any of those. We go and visit, we don't make dua. Okay? Person's terminal, we don't make what? La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. We don't say, for example, La ba's tahur. It's going to be all right. Everything's going to be fine. This is just what? A purification. We don't say those things. Doesn't mean we won't get the reward. But we're missing out on some of what? The mukammilat. Some of the things that will make the reward more complete. Increase the reward many times over. So we need to be keen when we go in there, have that checklist in our mind, and start what? Going down, checking the boxes. Okay? And we also need to realize, going back to the main theme, is that, our goal is to build strong Muslim communities. Communities where there is this ulfa, there's this affection, this affinity, this love, where we feel like there's a real brotherhood and sisterhood. And this is one of the ways you do that. You hear about somebody being sick and you make a point to get there. The effect that that's going to have on the relationship between you and that person is tremendous. And anybody who's ever been sick and been visited, or been called by somebody who couldn't visit, and they ask about you with such sincerity and concern, you know what that does for your heart and what you feel about that person thereafter. So we need to be mindful of the fact that this is the goal that the Sharia has in mind when they mention these types of things, visiting the sick. And we should never belittle the importance of it or think, okay, somebody else is going to do that. No, we should be keen to do it ourselves for the sake of these relationships. So that's what I wanted to mention regarding visiting the sick. Any questions, comments, or complaints? Abd'Llah, Sheikh محمد.
Before you enter the room with the sick person, take permission before you come in.
Allah Zakir.
Don't barge in,
Eh?
And it would be nice if you could take some gift.
Allah Zakir. To relieve some of the burden on the family. Allah Zakir. So Muhammad, he mentioned two more etiquettes. He said one, is that you should always make it isti'dhan. You should always ask permission before entering. Just don't barge in. Give permission. And he also, it's good if you bring some gift. It could be a gift for the sick person to what? Lift their spirits. Again, nothing you could do. Or you could what? Bring something for the family to relieve what? Whatever stress they're going through. For example, don't make the family, and this is something that has become a custom, which is backwards, where the family is expecting visitors for the sick, and they'll prepare what? These lavish meals to feed the people who are coming to visit. No, it should be the opposite. They should be able to relax because they're already under so much stress and anxiety because they have someone ill. And you should what? Bring things to them so they can just relax. So that's a good point, Sheikh Muhammad. Good point, Allah Zakir.
There's one more thing. If you couldn't be helpful for that sick person, don't go there and make it worse.
Ahsant, Allah Zakir. And we said that if you can't help, don't hurt. If you can't make it better, don't make it worse. Allah Zakir.
Yeah.
That's all the Sheikh Habib.
Yeah, it was asked online here about when it's about the women going to visit the men, if it's something that doesn't make her husband jealous or she doesn't approve of. It should also be like something that...
Okay, yeah, I mean, there's no question. There's a lot of things that a woman has to consider if she was going to do that. And one of them would be how her husband would feel about it. So, don't get me wrong, if we mention something like this, doesn't mean that it's supposed to be understood in a vacuum. That all those other factors and all those other things that the religion encourages us to think about have to be considered. So obviously we're just talking about the basic permissibility of it, but that doesn't mean that the woman just doesn't have to consider other things. Also, we're not encouraging it. We're not saying it has to be done. It becomes wajib. We're just saying we need to know what's permissible, because what may happen is a sister may say, yes, so-and-so was ill. Some respected person in the community was ill. My husband and I went to see him. And a bunch of sisters might jump all over her, saying, Alhamdulillah, you want to see a man who's sick? You know, it's haram. But it's what? It is permissible. Under those circumstances, it will be permissible. So that's the whole point of mentioning it. But yeah, definitely, let's say the husband, for example, was a very jealous person. We mentioned when we talked about the relationship between husband and wives. And we said that one of the things that husband and wife have to do is be respectful and considerate of their spouse's sensibilities. If there's something that really annoys and vexes the spouse, you're supposed to avoid it because of what? Because the love and the mercy and the strength in the relationship that comes as a result of that. And we mentioned the hadith of, or the athar of Asma, who was married to a Zubair. And how Zubair was what? A very jealous man. And how Asma, she used to work the land of a Zubair, the land that the Prophet had given to a Zubair to work on. And it was like 1.5 miles from the city center, from Al-Madinah. So she would have to walk all that way to get to the haqal, to get to the land. And then after she worked it and basically harvested and had all the grain, she would have to take that grain, do what? Put it on her head and walk what? A mile and a half. We're not talking about a mile and a half on one of those smooth tracks in the back of a high school, right? We're talking about rough terrain, probably had no shoes, right? And she had to walk that long walk on the rough terrain with that big, heavy grain on her head. And so it happened that the Prophet ﷺ, he happened to be passing by her one day, saw her state and condition with some of his companions, and he was on a camel, he was riding. So he lowered the camel so that she could ride with him. And so she wouldn't have to carry all that grain and walk all that long distance. And she said, but I remembered Zubair's jealousy. So she just stood there in a way to let the Prophet know to go ahead and ride on. And so he got the message and he rode on. So we mention that to show that although she wasn't doing anything haram, it couldn't be haram because the Prophet wouldn't do anything haram. So the fact that he offered her a ride means it was okay for her to do that. But even though it was okay, Islamically, it wasn't okay what? In her household, with her husband. So she let it go. So yeah, no doubt, this same thing, we can make an analogy. Is it okay Islamically? Yeah, but it might not be okay with her husband. He might say what? No way. Or if he were to find out, he would become incensed. So yeah, she shouldn't do it. Like,
most of the time I have seen that the sick person at the hospital or anywhere, they watch TV, they're killing time. When a visitor comes, and then he said, try to direct the sick to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to increase the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to increase the righteousness, righteous deeds, and try to turn it off, that TV, because it may, that's affecting him purity.
Subhanallah. And you may do it in a subtle way. You wouldn't do it direct, just shut it off.
No.
Hey, I was watching that. But you may say, Ya akhi, what do you think if we nastaghil hadha al-waqt? We use this time and read some Quran. I'll read some Quran to you, or read some tafsir, or whatever. So yeah, we encourage the person. I said we said that you remind the person, you give him a suitable advice or reminder which suits the circumstances. And you can just talk in general, about the virtues of a tawbah. You can just talk about it in general. And you could just share. It wouldn't have to be you give him a lecture, but you just share. And you talk about huquq al-nas, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forego His rights, but He won't forego the rights of creation. And so we need to make sure that we're always giving people back their rights. Sometimes those rights are tangible things. You've taken someone's property, right? And sometimes they're intangible things. So for example, you've insulted a person, or you've slandered a person. You want to give back those rights before what? Before the time comes when there's no dollar and there's no cent. So yeah, these are the things that we should be doing when the person is ill and we visit them. So they're benefiting, okay? Whether they necessarily see it or not, they're benefiting. And we can leave saying that we benefited the person in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at least. Even if they didn't really see it as a benefit, they wanted to watch, whatever was on TV. طيب في شيء يا اخوان, anything else? تفضل يا شيخ.
Does a sick person have to let the community know that he's sick?
Well, have to is a strong word, but in order for them to give him his right, they would need to know. So it's good if the sick person is ill, if he lets someone know who can let the community know. So for example, in this case, probably the easiest way is if the sick person or one of his family members were to call the imam. And the imam could announce it in Jummah. He could put it on the website, and the people in the community would know. Because it's going to be hard for them to fulfill his right if they don't know that he's ill. Does that make sense? طيب. في شيء? Go once. تفضلي.
Another sister had a question. Would it be proper for two sisters to go to visit the individual?
It would be proper. It would be proper, generally speaking, because khalwa is when one man is alone with one woman. As soon as there's an additional man or additional woman, there's no khalwa. So it would be acceptable, generally speaking. Generally speaking, it would be acceptable. I would caution against it, but it would be acceptable. It wouldn't be haram. They wouldn't be doing haram. There wouldn't be khalwa. Yeah. طيب. في شيء? Any questions?
Preview for next week?
Preview, we're probably not going to complete because the funeral one is kind of long. But we're going to start talking about the rights of the deceased. So when a person passes away, what rights they have on the Muslims. This was a little lengthy. May not be able to get it done in one session. Maybe take 2 sessions. And then I think after that, I may add just a few points beyond the hadith that are important for us to think about. And then hopefully after that, we'll be going to another section of the book. We'll be done with interpersonal relations. طيب, so with that said, we'll close. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. بارك الله فيك.